Hi guys, so today what we're going to look at is borderline killers. So, what does that mean? I'm going to just getting into it straight away, but what do you normally think of when you think of a serial killer or someone who does harm to others? What word jumps out at you? Psychopath, right? But that's just a buzzword, really. Like, there are actual mental health conditions, and normally we think of people who are narcissistic, who are, you know, psychopathic, um, antisocial, of course. I mean, it is antisocial in nature to kill someone. Um, but borderline personality disorder, could that lead to someone killing somebody? Let's find out. And there's two in particular that I want to look at. Dennis Nilsen and Jeffrey Dahmer. When you look at how they killed and why they killed, you just think to yourself, they both killed in very similar manners, like they killed to stop people from leaving. What is one of the telltale signs of borderline personality disorder? Frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. And when you look at both their lives, right, so let's just take this for a second. And as this is a condition that I've been said to have traits of, I'm kind of a bit like, oh fuck. But bear with me. I'm nothing if not fair, and I'm not just going to say because I have traits and a lot of them of this condition that, oh, they're not all bad. People who have cluster B personality disorders and even cluster A can do serious damage to people. Any personality disorders, really, it's just that we hear about cluster B the most, don't we? Like, that's the one that we always hear about. But it's believed, and I'm just reading up on it here, Dennis Nielsen is suffering from a severe personality disorder which has no name. It was very messy the way they talked about it, but it says here, which includes paranoid, schizoid, hysterical, and sociopathic tendencies. An Old Bailey jury was told yesterday. Dr. James McKeith, a forensic psychiatrist called by the defence, told the jury that Nilsen, who has confessed to killing 15 young men, was consistently inconsistent. He could appear quite normal for much of the time and yet attack his victims without judgment or self control. Now, very badly worded, and looking at the analysis, it was very messy the way they did it. But when they say without judgment or self control, and I remember seeing all camera footage of Dennis Nielsen with one of his boyfriends. They were both, him and Jeffrey Dahmer were both gay, and that could be a part of it as well. Not knowing who you are, not being able to accept who you are, consistently inconsistent, shifting sense of self. Maybe could it be borderline? I think so. But when Dennis Nielsen was with one of his boyfriends, something just clicked and set him off, and he had an anger outburst. He was quite prone to them, and he could go from 0 to 180, 0 to 1,000, in the blink of an eye. And if you've watched Des, with David Tennant, who did a great job playing Dennis Nielsen, the aforementioned Des, it just it just seems to me like it has to be borderline. Like, when asked why he stopped everyone from leaving and he killed them, his answer was, everyone leaves. Everyone always leaves me. You know? And looking back at his life story, it wouldn't be hard to imagine that he felt abandoned, that he felt like everyone's going to leave me. I need to do whatever I can to avoid people leaving me. Like here, just reading down, it it says the jury were shown a letter in which Nielsen had written from Brixton Prison under the title "Mental Condition," and these are Nielsen's own words. I have felt since my teenage years that I am a creative psychopath. Fair enough, he wrote, adding that when he was under pressure or drunk, dormant feelings were released. I can't look back, only forward, he added. I do feel like I deserve to be punished. So he owned up to it anyway. He says, dismembering and disposing of the bodies had been risky, he wrote. In a strange way, I think it became a part of the wish to be caught, as in he wished to be taken into custody. I was at a tense breaking point, waiting to be caught so that I could be released from the guilt. It's almost like, I know what I'm doing is wrong, but I can't stop my compulsion to do wrong. He went on to describe his affection for his last victim, Stephen Sinclair. I would like to have had a long social and sexual relationship with Stephen. He said he had washed Mr. Sinclair's body, laid it out, and imagined himself lying next to it on a mortuary slab. Very, very similar to Jeffrey Dahmer. Like, both of them seem to lack the social skills necessary to have a meaningful relationship, and could that be schizoid? Schizoid personality disorder is a cluster A personality disorder, and what it's marked by is very flat affect. So say for instance, if you're told that, and this is my understanding of it, you can by all means feel free to look it up, I'm not a doctor, but my understanding of schizoid personality disorder is very flat affect. So you could be told your grandmother's died, or you could be told that you're getting a promotion in work, and it's like, okay, back to work. Like you're not responsive in a very affectionate sort of way, or very numb and emotionless. As far as I know, it's not necessarily associated by itself anyway with violence, but it can often be said that schizoids lack empathy. They just don't care, they're not moved by anything. They don't have desires for relationships. They might have only one close family member, and that's the only person they let into their lives. It often gets mistaken for autism. But I would say, being autistic myself, I always had a desire. It's just that it was very difficult, and it does seem like these guys have a desire as well, but they just lack the social skills to form any sort of meaningful relationship. Could it be possible that perhaps schizoid personality disorder, there is a desire there, and people just say there's no desire because it's just too difficult? Yeah, like, I mean, it's a hard one. Doctors say they know everything about everything, but opinion is always changing. I think borderline definitely fits the bill more. Now, what Dennis Nilsen and Jeffrey Dahmer did was very evil, of course, but it's easy to go psychopath. You're a psychopath. Are we missing something? But anyway, I'll read on here because this is what people who are prosecuting Dennis Nilsen said about him. Mr. Alan Green, prosecuting, suggested to Dr. James McKeith, that there were clear signs of self-control in Nilsen's behaviour. He was intelligent, cunning, quick-witted and resourceful. He had hoodwinked police, aka he fooled them, you know what I mean? Like, he messed them around. He had hoodwinked police who were dealing with the report of one of his attempted murders. I think he hoodwinked himself, replied Dr. McKeith. Mr. Green said that, even in the moment of the attack, Nilsen was in control of himself. Strangling the student Paul Nobbs, he had had what he called a change of heart. A second defence psychiatrist, Dr. Patrick Galway, agreed that Nilsen was paranoid and schizoid, but added that he believed he also suffered from a disorder which he described as the false self. Very borderline, like shifting sense of self. Like, and you imagine that. Now, this article is from 1983, October 28th, 1983. And the nameless disorder is what it's being called by Nick Davies. It sounds very borderline. And like, looking at Nilsen's life, it's not hard to see that he could have borderline. Like, let's have a look through him, shall we? Let's have a little gander. Let me look through it. Dennis Andrew Nilsen was born on 23rd of November 1945 in Fraserburgh, Aberdeenshire, or is it Fraserborough? It's Edinburgh. It's not Edinburgh. Did you ever see that video where there's an American tourist? I'm in Edinburgh, and a Scottish fella comes in behind. It's Edinburgh, you wank. And he goes, what? Aberdeenshire. So Dennis Nilsen is an Aberdeen man, or was, I should say. He was the second of three children born to Elizabeth Dutty White and Olive Magnus Moksheim, who had adopted the surname Nilsen. Moksheim was a Norwegian soldier who had travelled to Scotland in 1940 as part of the Free Norwegian Forces following the German occupation of Norway. And from what I gather, he was constantly in and out of Nilsen's life. He was barely constant, you know. He'd show up whatever it suited him, pretty much. Yeah, after a brief courtship, he was married to Elizabeth White in May 1942. The newlyweds moved into her parents' house. Yeah, and the marriage was difficult. Apparently, Olaf. Is it Olaf? Yeah, like Olaf Melberg, the Swedish footballer. We go Olaf. I think Olaf did not view the marriage with any seriousness, and he was way more preoccupied with the Free Norwegian Forces. Seems like he made absolutely no effort to be a father or a husband. After the birth of her third child, Nilsen's mother concluded that she had rushed into the marriage without thinking. Elizabeth Dutty. Yeah, and the couple divorced in 1948. I can tell you from personal experience that is very heartbreaking. You know, like, I mean, my mum and dad were together, then they weren't, then they were again, and then they split up. But then me and my brother both said it, because I was kind of like to him when he was saying it was hard on us, and then, you know, we already knew they'd broken up, so the divorce wasn't really that bad. But then he said no, but it was finalised, you know, it was like the nail in the coffin. And he was dead right. It's like we already knew that they had split up and we weren't a family anymore, and it was quite upsetting, to be honest with you. But then the divorce was the final straw, you know, it's like, oh, this is real now. We have to accept it, you know, and it's not easy. So I don't want to say my heart goes out to him, but kind of does, to be fair. Yeah. All three of the couple's children, Olav Jr., who happened to be the favourite child, you can imagine. You can imagine why. Olav Jr., OJ, and OJ Nilsen, Dennis and Sylvia. He had one sister and one brother. Had been conceived on their father's brief visits to their mother's household. So he was basically popping in to have a shag and then hopping back out, you know. He gave her three children and left her to mind them all on her own, pretty much. So Elizabeth's parents, Andrew and Lily, who never approved of her daughter's choice of husband, I wonder why. They seemed to be very supportive of her and considerate towards the grandchildren. And I remember hearing that Dennis was very close to his granddad, his maternal granddad. It describes Dennis here as being quiet but adventurous. I'd say it's kind of, I always find it very heartbreaking. Do you, like, when you hear of them actually having a nice time as a child, but having it just fucking snatched away, and it's like, oh, did they ever really have a chance? Not excusing their behaviour, but you ever just think how it could have been different, how it could have been better for them, you know, that kind of way. I certainly do anyway. But Dennis talks about enjoying family picnics with the whole family, with his mum and his brother and sister. His grandparents had a pious lifestyle, which he later described as cold and dour. pious being, holier than thou and I'm better than you, that kind of way. Uh, yeah, virtue, which, requires religious devotion. I imagine they're probably Presbyterian Scots, which can be very cold and dour indeed. Yeah, he liked picnics and long walks in the countryside and was carried on his grandfather's shoulders. And it says here he was particularly close to him. So he was the one constant man in his life. Olaf Jr. and Sylvia occasionally accompanied Nilsen and his grandfather on these walks. Despite only being 5 years old, Nilsen vividly recalls these walks as being very long along the harbour, across the wide stretch of beach, up to the sand dunes, which rise 30 feet behind the beach, and onto the Inverloch and Cairnbulg. It's villages. So in Inverloch, and any Scots in the any Scots below, let me know how you pronounce that, please. Inverloch and Cairnbulg, 6.4 kilometres east of Fraserburgh in northeast Scotland. I'm gonna say Fraserburgh because it's Edinburgh, so I'll go with that. Yeah. Formerly consisted of 3 fishing villages. Okay, yep, grand. Okay. Don't like a little coastal village. He described this stage of his childhood as one of massive contentment. So, he was content, he was happy. When you're not like bursting with excitement, but the feeling of being content is lovely. It's a really nice feeling. It's one that a lot of us take for granted, but being content is a great feeling. You just don't feel the urge to go anywhere, you don't feel the urge to do anything. You're just happy where you are right now. And like, I know waking up and I'm like, I don't have to be anywhere today. I can sit and sunbathe out the back garden in the summertime anyway. Nilsen referred to his grandfather as his great hero and protector. His grandfather worked as a fisherman, so they were right next to the North Sea. A lot of Scottish trawlermen. It was a big industry, where they could make a living going off, and they'd be gone for weeks, months even. You hear of Icelandic fishermen. I find the Icelandic accent can be quite similar to the Scottish accent in many ways, and some of the names, like when you hear son, like Ferguson, would be a Scottish name. The Fagersons that play for Scottish rugby team. What else am I thinking? Anderson, kind of more Danish, and yeah. But yeah, life would be empty for Dennis until his grandfather returned from being away at sea. So it was obvious that he was eager, waiting for him to come back. He loved him. And by 1951, Nilsen's grandfather's health was in decline, but he continued to work. There's that Presbyterian work ethic that they always talk about. Yeah, while he was at work fishing in the North Sea on the 31st of October 1951, his grandfather died of a heart attack at 62. Yeah, here we are. Brought to the White family home prior to burial. Yeah, and I remember hearing about Nilsen describing this moment as a significant one in his life, looking at the dead body. His mother told him that his grandfather was just sleeping, but he'd gone to a better place. It was an open coffin, like we have over here in Ireland, an open wake. I went to one for my nanny's funeral. Lena, it was mentioned to her. Yeah, and it was just, it's kind of weird because the body's so cold, and it is a strange experience. Alright, it's my first one that I've been to an open wake before for their neighbours, because they would have all been working class dubs, so that open wake was the norm. My mum never liked it really, but Now, it's something that I've been to, and it is an unusual experience to say the least. That's for sure. They're there, but they're not there, if that makes sense. Yeah, this was a turning point for Dennis Nilsen. So he became a lot more quiet and withdrawn. And I remember him talking about this in the. He used to walk alone to the beach in Varaloche in 1954 or 1955. It isn't quite clear, but he became submerged beneath the water and was nearly dragged out to sea. He gasped for air that wasn't quite there, and he believed that his grandfather was about to arrive and pull him out before experiencing a sense of tranquility. His life was saved by another young man who dragged him ashore. And shortly after this, Nilsen's mother Elizabeth moved out of his grandparents' home and into a flat with the three children. And she married a builder called Andrew Scott. Yeah, Andrew Scott is an Irish actor. Interesting. She had 4 more children with him in as many years, so a child for every year. And you can imagine that makes him feel quite forgotten. You're not important anymore. That tends to happen. I'm with my new hubby now, you're not important to me anymore. That's kind of how I imagine it would have felt for him. And yeah, Dennis wasn't a big fan of Andrew. He said he was a strict and unfair disciplinarian, but came to begrudgingly respect him, and the family moved to Stricken in 1955. Yeah, upon puberty, so when Nilsen started going through puberty, he realised he was gay, and it caused him a lot of confusion and shame. And I remember hearing stories of people over here in Ireland, with it being such a strict Catholic country, being gay was not allowed. People used to push it down, and that's never a good thing. Pushing it down, pushing your sexual urges and your fantasies down. Well, I mean, if you're a fucking killer, then yeah, push them all the way down. But I imagine that contributed to the violent behaviour, pushing and suppressing stuff. It usually does. Yeah, he kept his sexuality hidden from his family and his friends. Few friends, he didn't have many. Yeah, and I remember hearing this and it kind of disturbed me, but he said that a lot of the boys he was sexually attracted to with similar facial features of his sister, Sylvia, and he fondled her sexually. It doesn't say whether or not she fought him off, but I imagine she did. That's pretty fucking sick, isn't it? Yeah, but you see, I don't know. Catholics are very historically anyway, in Catholic Ireland it would have been forbidden to be gay. You'd be sent to a reform school, which were fucking horrendous. But Presbyterians can be quite hateful in that regard as well. Strict religions are always going to be anti-gay because it's not the norm for them. It seems like that really fucked him up, because it was yeah, he describes his attraction for boys as a manifestation of the care that he felt for Sylvia, his sister. Oh, that's just kind of freaking me out. He made no effort to have any sexual contact with any of his peers that he was sexually attracted to. So any other boys that he was attracted to sexually, he wouldn't attempt to, go over and say hello. That's interesting. Just while we're on the subject of Scotland, I remember watching the video for, Bronski Beat Small Town Boy with Jimmy Somerville. If you've ever, if you've heard the song, you like it, watch the video. It's a very powerful video where, he's obviously not accepted by his strict, more macho dad, and his mum doesn't know what to make of him being gay. Don't know if he's even told him at this point, but he's at the pool and he's looking at a fella on a diving board who he's attracted to, and his mates come over to him and he tells them by the looks of it, and he goes well, I think they kind of push him into it, a bit of peer pressure. they see that he's eyeing your man up and down, and they obviously nudge him and go, "I'll go on over and ask him out then." Ask him out, as Kevin Bridges would say. Aye, ask him out. Out, out. So he works up the courage to go and ask the lad out, but the lad looks at him disgusted, It's like, "Oh, you Jesse boy, you hen." As it says here, that's what Olav Jr. referred to Dennis as. He called him hen, which is slang in Scottish for girl. "You wee hen." Mm. Yeah, like. But after that, I'm just reading through this here and just looking at Jimmy Somerville, like when he asked the lad out in the video, the lad not only looks at him in a disgusted manner, but then him and a gang of his mates beat him up. He comes home battered and bruised, and the police are saying to the parents, "He won't tell us what happened." And yeah, it's like, if you tell anyone what happened, they'll know that it was because you were gay, and if you tell them you're gay, then people will look unfavourably on you. So it was quite sad to see, but it looks here like the reason Olav Jr. suspected that Nilsen Dennis was gay because he had fondled him while he was sleeping. Yeah, he caressed and fondled the body of his older brother as he slept. Ugh. Yeah, Nilsen himself was fondled by an older boy and didn't find the experience unpleasant. It's not saying you love it, but yeah, and he believed that the fondling of his sister was because he was bisexual. Okay. Yeah, at the age of 14 he joined the Army Cadet Force and wanted to escape his rural origins. Wasn't very sporty, but he had a flair for history when he joined. Yeah, he never showered in the company of his fellow soldiers because he was afraid of getting an erection around them. And imagine, like at that time, how he would have been treated in the British Army. Oh, beaten black and blue. He decided to bathe alone, masturbate, which he did. Yeah, so what he would do was he would shower and wash alone in the bathroom, and then he would start wanking. Jesus. So in 1964, Nilsen passed his initial catering exam. Yeah, he was an army chef. I remember hearing that. And he was officially assigned to the 1st Battalion of the Royal Fusiliers, which is the Fusilier City of London Regiment. Okay. Alright. In Osnabrück, West Germany, where he served as a private. In this deployment, Nilsen began to increase his intake of alcohol. And that's where things really started getting messy, as he starts boozing a lot more. He described himself and his colleagues as hard-working, boozy lots. And I have a mate that's in the army, and I think he would agree with that. He says we're the fittest pissheads in the world. His colleagues recalled he often drank to excess in order to ease his shyness. Again, I can also relate to that. Being extremely anxious as a young man, I drank myself into oblivion to give people the impression that I was more outgoing than I was, and that's often the case. You drink a lot to be more outgoing and to get rid of those nerves you have. Again, overlap with Jeffrey Dahmer. He drank a lot. He was alone in the house. His mother just upped and left, abandoned him. So it just goes to show, those Those abandonment issues were deep rooted in both Dennis and Jeffrey. Nilsen, on one occasion, Nilsen and a German youth drank themselves into a stupor. Dennis und Otto, ja. Germans are very gay friendly. Always kind of have been, but I remember being in Austria as well, and the traffic lights are two men holding hands with each other, and it's a very homoerotic country, put it that way. Austria, anyway. I've never been to Germany, but I certainly get the impression that they're very gay friendly. And I always kind of had that element with them, you know? Yeah, when Nielsen awoke from this drunken stupor, he was in the German man's flat. No sexual activity had occurred, but the incident fueled Nielsen's sexual fantasies, which initially involved his sexual partner, invariably a young, slender man, being completely passive. Yeah, you see, this is the same thing with Jeffrey Dahmer. So you have the drinking, you have the abandonment issues from the family members just basically making them out to be a spare part, you're no longer important. They have the extreme abandonment issues, and now everybody's left. Please don't leave me, and I don't have the social skills to make lots of friends. Everybody else has left me, so please don't leave me. Please don't leave me in the air. Oh, here we are now, yeah. So, from being passive, Nielsen then gradually started to imagine and fantasize over the partner being either unconscious or dead altogether. And on several occasions, he also made tentative efforts to have his own prone body experience. Oh, he wanted his own body to be sexually interfered with by one of his colleagues. So basically, I'm drunk, take advantage of me, In these instances, whenever he and his colleagues drank to excess, Nielsen would pretend that he was inebriated in the hope that one of his colleagues would make sexual use of him, of his supposedly unconscious body. But you see, not everyone's going to think like him. His warped mind is obviously working differently. Fucking hell. He wanted people to basically sexually abuse him, by the sounds of it. Jesus. Yeah, and he worked as a cook in the British Army while stationed in Norway. In 1967, he was deployed to the state of Aden, formerly Aden Colony and now part of Yemen in the Middle East, where he again served as a cook at the Al Mansoura prison. The posting was more dangerous than his previous postings in West Germany or Norway, I would imagine so, and Nielsen later recalled his regiment losing several men, often in ambushes en route to the army barracks. In fact, Nielsen was kidnapped by an Arab taxi driver who beat him unconscious and placed him in the boot of his car. Upon being dragged out of the boot, Nielsen grabbed the jack handle and knocked out the taxi driver to the ground before beating him unconscious. So he grabbed the jack handle, which is just the device used to apply great force or lift heavy loads. Like a jack to lift up something heavy. Think of when you're changing a tyre on a car. Simple, that kind of thing. Yeah, like a car jack, that's what it says here. And he knocked the driver to the ground before beating him unconscious. He then locked the man in the boot of his own taxi. Again, he masturbated in his own room in Aden. Aden was the colony of Aden, that is, not Aden the name. Yeah, he said he could split his own personality in order to fulfill his how do you even say that? Masturbatory fantasies or masturbatory? Certainly fucking disturbed anyway. Yeah, he completed all his deployments, but ooh, it feels like he was just getting by at this stage, and he solicited prostitutes as well at this point. Okay, just reading through his actual relationships because I know when he moved to London, he moved to North London, and this is kind of where he started actively seeking out relationships. But a lot of people who he formed relationships with happened to be unemployed and kind of wasters, so he was the main breadwinner, essentially. Just reading through it here. Yeah, so he met a young man called, what was his first name? David Gallican, 20-year-old man, being threatened outside a pub by two other men. Nilsen intervened in the altercation and took Gallican to his room at 80 Tynemouth Road in Cricklewood district of North London. The two spent the evening together drinking and talking. Upon this meeting, Nilsen learned that Gallican had recently moved to London from Weston-super-Mare, Somerset, was gay, unemployed, and residing in a hostel. Vulnerable, in other words, and someone he could take advantage of. And it says here that they were attracted to each other but seldom had intercourse. Yeah. Nielsen later, he recollected that he was sexually attracted to Gallican but did not have sex with him often. And initially, Nielsen appeared to be content with Gallican, but within a year, and they're moving into Melrose Avenue, the superficial relationship between the two men showed signs of strain. They slept in separate beds and both began to bring home casual sexual partners, so it's kind of like, an open relationship, if you like. Gallican later insisted that Nielsen had never been physically violent towards him, but he did engage in a lot of verbal abuse, and they'd been arguing frequently by early to mid 1976. Okay, here we go now. So Nielsen later stated that following a heated argument in May 1977, he ordered David Gallican to leave the residence. But Gallican told reporters that he had actually said he wanted to leave and ended the relationship. Nielsen formed brief relationships with several other young men over the following 18 months. That was his kind of body type, he liked slender, younger men. That was his thing, real feminine looking men, which would explain the sexual attraction to his sister. Very feminine looking, boyish as well. They looked like almost prepubescent. I would say immature looking men. None of his relationships lasted more than a few weeks, and none of the men ever expressed any intention of living with them on a permanent basis. And by late 1978, he was living a solitary existence. He had experienced at least 3 failed relationships in the previous 18 months. And he confessed to have developed an increasing conviction that he was unfit to live with. So self-hatred, if you like. He was obviously repulsive to a lot of people. And through this period, he devoted himself to his work more so. But he spent most evenings consuming spirits and lager and listening to music. And he's known to, we get on to the murders, so between 1978 and 1983, that's when the initial statement that I read out for you, Nick Davies, I think that was the name of the fella I said earlier, but he's suspected to have killed a minimum of 12 men and boys and to have attempted to kill 7 others. He initially confessed in 1983 to having killed about 16 victims. And the majority of Nilsen's victims were homeless or gay, or both, because they wouldn't be missed, because it was very taboo subject, to be gay at that time, and also being homeless. People typically don't even know who you are, they're estranged from their family, they're not important essentially, which is a very sad thing, Some of his victims were heterosexual people that he met in bars or on public transport or even outside his home. Yeah, interesting, yeah. All of Nilsen's murders were committed inside the 2 North London addresses where he resided in the years that he is known to have killed. Yeah, and typically they were lured through a guile, like, want to come back and have a drink, want to have some food, or you want a place to stay, the homeless people, I'm sure that would have been very appealing for them. And there's also a lot of, there was a lot of misinformation about AIDS, so people assumed everyone that was gay was going to give you AIDS, which is obviously completely incorrect. It's a sexually transmitted disease, but male, female, it always seems to be a gay thing, like it's not solely a homosexual thing, you know what I mean? Heterosexual people can get it too. He liked to get them extremely drunk, and then typically he would strangle with a ligature. So, ligature where you're tying something around the neck, or he was pressing down on their neck to strangle them, which is a real sign of dominance, like I control your last moments of life. They usually died of hypoxia, which is lack of oxygen to the brain. Yeah, and he admits to have engaging in sexual activities with 6 of his victims post mortem, so as they were dead, which is obviously necrophilia. But he was adamant that he had never penetrated any of his victims. Oh, that's interesting. Right. I remember him talking about Stephen Sinclair, and I remember in Des with David Tennant where he discussed Stephen Sinclair, and that was the one where he was like, he wanted to dress the body up and he wanted to show respect. You're kind of like, after what you did, but it was very impulsive, like it wasn't as if, it wasn't necessarily sadistic, it was quick, It was like people could only stand so much of him, and then after a while people didn't want to be in his company, and you could see that abandonment kicking in. Then the anger, the inappropriate anger, like he was quick to rage in certain cases, especially with people who he was sexually engaged with. But that fear of abandonment is very borderline. The shift in sense of self, the split personalities, dissociating, that's very borderline. Clearly an unstable sense of self. And the job hopping, going from job to job. He ended up in the police force. I don't know if this is true, but he's believed to have masturbated on a headstone at a grave, a tombstone. Don't know why I'm laughing at that, but yeah, I couldn't think of the word. That was Dennis Nilsen then. So that's his life story, pretty much, until he was arrested and put in jail. Like, he's described as the British Jeffrey Dahmer. And if we look at Jeffrey Dahmer, like, there's a lot of information on him. He was just basically abandoned. His dad was very emotionally distant. His mother was a lunatic. Joyce, I think, was her name. She was on a lot of different antidepressants and antipsychotics, I believe. She said she saw aliens. She attempted to kill herself. And then one day she just upped and left with his younger brother. David, I believe, was Jeffrey's younger brother. And Lionel, the father, like, he's suing Netflix now for the docudrama, as they call it, docu-series, with Evan Peters playing the aforementioned Jeffrey Dahmer. But you see a lot of apathy, a lot of misery, a lot of drinking, trying to suppress emotions. And rather than complete dominance, well, there is complete dominance in some ways with Nilsen, he's strangling, he's holding them down, he's obviously trying to get away with it as well and not be caught. And both of them slept with the bodies. Both of them had a fetish for inanimate objects. Like Jeffrey Dahmer used to sleep with mannequins, and then he would masturbate all over them, and there was a fascination with dead people. Like Jeffrey Dahmer had a real obsession with taxidermy and collecting bones and other things, and bleaching them. Him and his dad used to dig up roadkill, which is quite a weird hobby to be involved in with your son, but let's look at the borderline element, right? So there's a lot of unstable relationships. Dennis Nilsen definitely meets that. Jeffrey Dahmer, like, he initially started killing people when they tried to leave him. He even had someone stay over with him for a few days and he didn't kill them. And it's when they tried to leave that he wanted to kill them. Frantic efforts to avoid real or imagined abandonment. Like, it's not unreasonable to go, I have to go to work, but I'll see you later. I'd like to do this again, but if you have someone who was intensely borderline and then has weird schizotypal personality type, which is what Jeffrey Dahmer was believed to have as well, that would explain the weird obsession with taxidermy, like roadkill and mannequins, like sleeping with mannequins. I believe there was some fellow with that disorder, schizotypal, who was in a relationship with a car, and he would kiss the car, and like was a gay relationship with a car, and it was very strange. But he would actually have sex with the car by putting it, when you can imagine. It's just very bizarre behaviours, schizotypal. Schizoid seems to be more withdrawn and very unemotional, very flat affect, like I said, but with the borderline there's intense emotional outbursts. Don't leave me, don't abandon me. Serious depression, which Jeffrey Dahmer had. Nilsen seemed to have it as well. Dennis Nilsen, where there was extreme drinking, feeling sorry for themselves, shifting sense of self, like I don't know what I want to work as. But apply a lot to Jeffrey Dahmer. Like, he worked as a phlebotomist, so taking people's blood, and then there was a disgusting scene in the Netflix series where he started drinking the blood, and I'd heard he was doing that. Yeah, he was a cannibal. He liked to eat the corpses. He wanted them to be a part of him forever. Which is, you can see, like, with the intense anger of the borderline, and some people say sociopathy as well. I don't know, it's a messy one. With Dennis Nilsen, there was clearly elements of narcissism as well. Like, I'm in charge, I need to be the main breadwinner here. I own you, picking people that are not working, who are homeless, who are vulnerable and younger than him. That's a real power trip, which is quite narcissistic, but there's also borderline elements there too. There's a thing called the malignant borderline, where you will have all the symptoms of borderline, but you weaponize it and use it against people. There's a malignant narcissist as well, so you've got elements of antisocial behaviour and borderline personality disorder, which is a very toxic combination and can certainly lead you to kill people, having outbursts and attacking people. But when you look at someone like Dennis Rader, or Dennis Rader's a pretty good example of it. sick, twisted, sadistic fuck. You know, he wanted people to be alive so he could torture them. He even called himself BTK, bind, torture, kill. That's sadistic. He got pleasure from hurting other people while they were still alive. Dennis Nilsen and Jeffrey Dahmer just killed them. You know, at least that we know of. They just didn't want them to leave them. You know, they were just shells of human beings who needed someone to give them purpose and meaning in life. And I'd say as well, struggled to come to terms with being gay. Well, not say, we know they did, because they said it themselves, and at the time it wasn't socially acceptable to be gay. It was a real seedy underground thing, and both of them used that to their advantage because they knew people wouldn't be missed if they were killed and they happened to be gay, and people found they were having sexual relationships with other men. Then, you know, it would only add to their embarrassment, put it that way. Like, borderline personality disorder is a tricky one, but can it lead to people carrying out this sort of behaviour? I think these two cases prove it can, given the right set of circumstances and nature versus nurture, you know. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, guys. I chose Dennis Nilsen more so because I think more people know about Jeffrey Dahmer, and you can look him up. There'll be a lot more information about him. The cannibal of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. But yeah, like, it's not just antisocial or narcissistic. Borderlines are capable of very, very violent and very impulsive behaviour, you know. I think that proves it. But guys, I'm going to wrap it up there, and let me know your thoughts. This has been interesting making it, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Not every serial killer is a psychopath. There can be other things going on. It's just a buzzword, you know. So take care of yourselves and look out for those pesky psychopaths and serial killers. Catch you in the next one.